Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, and today I'm joined by the first international guest on the show. I'm so glad to be joined by Mr. Nami Zarringhalam, the co-founder and chairman of Truecaller. Thank you so much, Nami, for joining me. It's such an honor for me to be able to host you.
Thanks, Jivraj, for having me. It's a great podcast. I've been listening for some time now and really appreciate your interviews. It's fun to hear other entrepreneurs' journey.
Great to hear that, Nami. I mean, I'm so excited for this episode, especially because Truecaller is special in more ways than one. The originality, the virality, the growth, the global footprint. I could go on, and we probably will through this episode. But to get started, I want to touch upon virality, right? Virality, in my opinion, is perhaps the single most important and black box factor in every entrepreneur's mind, because everyone who sets out to build a consumer product is probably looking to someday claim that they can get to 200, 300 million monthly active users. But you've not just been able to claim that, you've been able to achieve that at scale, and we can see a live example of it, right? So now that you have that benefit of hindsight, maybe if you could talk to us about how virality was built into the product and what are your learnings from being able to build it on a viral scale. I think that would be great to hear and wonderful to grasp for all budding entrepreneurs listening.
Yeah, for sure. So, to start off with, I should mention that virality wasn't really something that we initially built for. Like, we didn't have a blueprint saying, we should do this and that, etc. We were just trying to build a product really for ourselves, my co-founder Alan and me. And we were engineers. We just put stuff together, and made it work. And it just so happened that a lot of people really liked that product and had the same kind of problems that we had. It wasn't until later that we realized what really made the product go viral. Like, we had, an incident with, not an incident, but a chat with one of our users that we met at an event, and he was telling us that the first time he got to know about Truecaller, it was because his friend asked him to give his father's phone number, and his friend would then tell him the name of his father, and his mind was blown when his friend got to know or said the name of his father, and that kind of oral virality has really been one of the strengths of Truecaller, and it's something that we definitely haven't taken for granted, but we didn't know it existed in that way. We thought of virality in the same way that you thought of virality when it comes to for a while, the company was started back in 2009, and we started to work full time in 2010. But for a while, you got blinded by the kind of growth hacks that you heard, Facebook do, and, all these different companies that did growth hacks. And we tried to learn from them as well in terms of, like, when do you ask for a user to review your app? When do you ask for the user to do this, etc., to kind of share something in the app, etc., to create virality? And those things definitely did help. I don't want to say that they didn't help, but I think the base use case was so strong that, anything that we did was kind of really tiny compared to the virality that the product got inherently. Kind of.
Yeah. No, I completely understand, because I know the joy that comes in when, unknown numbers calling and Truecaller can tell you the name of it. And I'm sure every one of us listening has experienced that as well. So superb to hear that. But to take it forward from there and understand the growth loops that you perhaps utilized from within the vantage point that you had, how did you replicate the growth, organic growth that you talk about from different geographies and couple it to multiple other places and ensure that from perhaps 5,000 downloads a day to the 500,000 mark that you talk about, how did you achieve that level of growth and what was the road towards it? If you could perhaps tell us about that and spill a couple of secrets, I think that would be great.
Well, first of all, the main experience of Truecaller, when you're expecting the caller ID and the call blocking to work as we advertise it, then you need to meet the level of accuracy that the user is expecting. We have a KPI internally, which we call hit rate. It's similar to if you would be using any search engine, let's say Google, and you search for something, out of 10 times, how many times do we actually get you a response with an accurate name? And once we figured that, and this was back in 2012, we realized that this KPI was actually the thing that was making the app go viral, because there was a stage where you got from 0 to 30% that you had 1 to 3 star reviews. Basically, people were not satisfied with the experience. And then there was a stage between 30 and let's say 70% where you had 3 to 4 star reviews. And I'm not saying reviews made it go viral. I'm just using that to measure the satisfaction level of the users. And then when you got past those 70%, that's really when things get viral, and you start to see these 5-star reviews, and people are raving about it. And we saw this first in Lebanon. We tried to replicate it by acquiring users in a market that we thought was similar to Lebanon, which was Jordan. It happened there as well. So we thought, to ourselves, we found a growth engine. We know exactly what we need to do. Now we just need money to expedite this process. And we went out to raise money. And at the time, going on a tangent here, I'll get back in a moment. But, at the time, the investors we were meeting, they were all like, yeah, but, Facebook ID and Google Gmail ID is going to take over the world. So who cares about phone numbers? So we had a really tough time raising money. It didn't really help that we were growing in markets that were at the time not sexy. Like, you go back to 2012, 2013, no one cared about Middle East, no one cared about Africa, no one cared about India. Right? It wasn't until you're thinking 2014 when suddenly Facebook, Google, Apple, everyone woke up, and suddenly India was the next frontier, and everything, everyone's investing and all these things. So we had a tough journey from that point of view. But one thing that we were really lucky on was that our numbers always went to the right and up. So no matter how you were looking at it, like in terms of downloads, in terms of engagement, in terms of, even monetization, we dabbled with for a while, everything was just going up and to the right. So there was something there, and we tried to explain it, but it wasn't really that interesting. Now, going back to the virality, there was a couple of other things that we did as well. One of the key learnings we had was that, when we give you the caller ID, we should just put the Truecaller logo there next to, the caller ID with the name popping up. And that gave us recognition, a continuous recognition that was very positive for the brand. And when you were showing the app off to someone, they would see that it's Truecaller providing this value, as opposed to your regular phone dialer, the one that comes with your device, because that's kind of what we were competing against. There was different dialers already on different phones, and it was hard to tell whether our kind of pop-up at the time was the thing that provided the value, or was it the call UI of the phone itself. So by just adding the logo at moments where we believe that we've added or created value for the user was a really important step for us. And the third thing I wanted to mention was that we did try all these growth hacks and different things to expedite that process. But for us, those things worked as bursts. That would, it's basically a one-time, twice, kind of burst thing that you can do. But then when you've done it, you can't keep doing it. Like it'll annoy the users, they'll uninstall, blah, 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 all these things. So you have to be cautious about how you do these things. And that was also a learning, because we've definitely had feedback from users where they thought that we were being annoying when we're asking you to set us as a default messaging app or default dialer, etc. And we see those things, we hear those things, and we try to back off. But when you're in the growth stage and you're hungry for growth, you try to push the limits, and then you realize, like, oh wait, I went too far, and then you back off. So I think part of that was also just not being afraid of pushing the limits a bit. It's not it's not great to do continuously, but after once or twice that you've annoyed your users, you really realize where the limit is and how you should position yourself for it. And that's a journey in itself, like just learning those things from your users, like what they find valuable and what they find reasonable as a trade-off.
Wow, I think that's phenomenal to hear. I mean, all of the things that you mentioned, including having that one metric and finding that North Star and then going after it all in. And also the last point where you talk about, just realizing where the limits are, pushing yourself, but realizing where the limits are and indexing on the retention factor, which I also understand is a huge, huge number for Truecaller in itself. And also going back to one of your previous things where you mentioned about raising capital, but I think that is just a testament to the fact that if you build something which talks for itself, eventually everything falls into place and aligns itself, right? So wonderful to hear. And I'll touch upon it again in a bit, but I want to go to, since we're talking about numbers, we're at growth, virality, just like when I was researching, I was baffled to see, I understand that, Truecaller is great. It's probably the top 5 app in my phone, but when I was reading through, I honestly was baffled. And over 260 billion odd monthly active users, top 3 downloaded apps after Facebook, WhatsApp, Truecaller, and the India story is of course phenomenal, which makes this episode even more special, right? So, but the underlying question is that when you both started off, you and Alan, and it started off from your kitchen, if I'm not wrong, right? And now
Correct.
to 250 odd team members who have more than 250 million odd customers, how do you manage and deal with such scale, right? Like, how do you internalize it? And are there any learnings that you've taken in the process of being able to blitzscale the organization, the team members, the consumer base, and still being very close to the consumer? Because it's not like you've scaled with an ignorance for the consumer. There are product features which keep coming out, which are innovating at the core of the company, right? And there is so much still happening. So I'd love if you can, take the next 5 minutes, talk to us about how scaling an organization truly works after you found perhaps that magic that you did with Truecaller and still continue to innovate.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting because I think that's a learning journey, not only as part of like how you structure an organization, but also in terms of your own leadership, like for me and Alan. So to start off with, we had a typical structure of, basically us co-founders, both being engineers, but also being like product managers. And we built the back end of Truecaller until we had about 100 million downloads. And at that point, we had more downtime than Twitter had back in 2013 with the fail whale and all that those things. So we used to have downtime. Maybe some months we'd have a full week of downtime.
Wow.
Just because we weren't able to cope with the scale, and we were writing everything in PHP and all these things. So it took that failure until we realized that we can't keep doing this, and we're not good enough engineers. So that's the point when we handed things over to our CTO, who was just dying to take things over from us and like rewrite everything and do it in a scalable way with microservices and this and that, etc. And we were so afraid of being disconnected from the engineering part of the org when that would happen. And slowly but surely that did happen. Like, we did get disconnected in terms of writing code. But once you, like, if you've ever been part of writing code in a team, even if you move beyond it, you start to realize, like, okay, if we're building this new feature, what are the potential solutions for that? And then you start to think about that, and it's actually really valuable because you can start to challenge folks as well on the way we're solving things, etc. Not necessarily like in the details, but structurally, like how you solve things. So I think that was the first learning journey for us. And at the time, we had a structure that was basically, engineering that was divided into front end and back end. And we had some product owners, and basically me and Alan were both jointly, PMs. The next thing for us was when we recruited Rishit Jhunjhunwala to join us as VP of product. And then we started to, we needed to start to let go of product, and that as well was difficult because we may, at times we had conflicting views of what the next steps should be, etc. But at the core of it, I always think that, or I've always seen that the most valuable product features that we have, or like the most valuable assets that this company has built, has always been built not by one person's idea, but rather by 2 or maximum 3 people involved, right? So you have one person who initiates the idea and then talks to someone who adds to the idea, and then that 1 + 1 = 3 suddenly. And it was kind of the same thing with Truecaller to start off with, because I was trying to solve my problem with not knowing who's calling or texting by looking at the caller ID feature. And then Alan was like, I need call blocking, and I need these spam markings, etc. And 1 + 1 suddenly became 3, and the call blocking thing was a great acquisition channel. And then people really stuck around as caller ID grew on them. So in a way, I feel like that's something that we want to retain. And in 2017, we basically had a team of or 2018, sorry, we had a team of 120 people or so. And that's when we realized, like, we were becoming really slow. The structure that we had was not, it wasn't meant for what we were doing. Now, a year prior to that, we had acquired this team, Chiller, in India, the fintech company. And when we acquired them, they came in with the promise that they will be able to continue their venture, but inside of Truecaller and inside the app, not as a separate app, but inside the app. And they would have full control. And initially, there was some hiccups there, but pretty quickly, they started to execute on their vision, and it became like this second, like a startup within the startup that was really doing fantastic things. And we observed that, and we learned from that. And then we said, how can we make this be be the thing that we do for all teams? How can we restructure the company? So we basically restructured the company, and what we have now and had since then, which has been very successful, is what we call business units. So every business unit has a BU lead, and for those business units, these BU leads have the full mandate to do whatever they want within that capability. So calling team, for instance, messaging team, etc., etc. Like there's a bunch of different teams. I think there's 11 of them, and they have full authority to do what they want to do within that scope of the product. And then it really becomes key who you put as BU lead. And that person gets the mandate to either delegate or take ownership of things themselves. So, it becomes like mini CEOs within the company leading different verticals. And that's the way we've been able to keep kind of innovating and allow the teams to move forward. And then it becomes more like me and Alan and the rest of management really becomes more like editors, if you will. Like in a journalistic world, we're more like editors rather than the people that come up with the stories or actually execute on them, etc. We're the guys that just make sure that things are stringent, that we're following the direction that we want to head into.
Awesome. I think that's a different and very structured way of looking at organizations. What I love the most is you're so cognizant of accepting that, this has been such a learning journey and the evident art of letting go. Like you have to love the product, you have to build it out, but to achieve the level of scale that perhaps all entrepreneurs aspire to achieve and the scale at which Truecaller does operate, you have to let go, you have to decentralize, and you have to provide ownership to everyone else. That's phenomenal to hear. Thanks for sharing that, Nami. That was great. Further, I think I want to talk about the global footprint that you've been able to establish, especially given the kind of conventional or rather non-conventional background that you come from, right? Because anybody who would hear the story of you and Alan building a global product with the kind of scale you've seen, perhaps top, I think 10, 15 companies in the world have been able to see such scale. And the thing that goes into being able to create this sort of a company, I think if you can probably tackle it at its core and talk to us about your learnings from developing that global footprint, I think that would be great, because your story is a testament and restores belief that no matter where you come from, you can truly build a global product, and you've proved it at scale, right? So I think I'll leave the ball in your court, and would love to hear how the global journey actually started, how you were able to scale and finally establish that footprint as well.
So Truecaller was actually the third company for Alan and myself. We had two other ventures before that. The first one was a kind of a search engine for home interior. It was basically crawling different e-commerces with home interior things and listing prices and all these things, so you could compare and these kind of things. And it wasn't very successful. It was actually pretty unsuccessful. But we learned like our engineering skills a lot from doing that thing. The second one was similar to Glassdoor, but before Glassdoor, it was basically, we used the crawler from the first project, this home interior search engine. We used that crawler to crawl all the businesses in Sweden and list them. And then you could log in anonymously and review your employer. Because at the time that was a different issue that we were having, that Alan was working at a place and wasn't very happy, racist slurs and stuff like that. So we built that website out of our own need as well. And every time we learned more in terms of engineering and product and what works and what doesn't work. But we also got one bit of insight, which was very valuable for us when we entered the Truecaller journey, which was that the Swedish market was too small for us to feel like we're doing something valuable enough. I don't know how to quantify valuable enough, but we just felt like, we can do more than this. And so we promised to each other that, the next thing we do is we're gonna go global from day one. And when we, built out Truecaller, we started out with a global perspective. Like, we want this to work in every corner of the world, and for everyone. So when you start with that mentality, you try to resolve issues or problems that you look at those problems in a different way, like from a different lens. As an example, we would, obsess about, the phone number series of, any country, so that when a user is trying to verify or like get onboarded, and they have a geo phone number, and this geo phone number is a new number series, it didn't exist before. So, would you use conventional, libraries that are out there to kind of try to authorize or approve these number series before you verify your user? You would be leaving a lot of users out in the cold, because these number series, they keep popping up in different countries all the time. And we would, obsess about reading the logs and just going through and seeing, like, oh, can we see patterns of these phone number series coming up, and then approving them manually and stuff like that. So, we looked at things very differently. We also wanted to build something that would work globally, which means that it had to be for everyone, meaning we didn't leave any OS out in the cold. Like, initially we built for Windows Mobile, for Symbian, for BlackBerry, for Android, for iOS, etc. And there was no OS that we left on the table. So we really built for everyone, and that was actually one of the keys to the success of Truecaller, which we didn't get into in the virality part, because it wasn't really because of virality. It was a different factor. But we built for Symbian at the time when everyone was basically only looking for iOS, and we built for Android when everyone was looking at iOS. And what happened was that Nokia had only two apps to promote in their strong markets. It was WhatsApp and it was Truecaller. So they promoted the hell out of WhatsApp and Truecaller. And when those users, eventually a year later, when those users would get an Android phone, the first apps that they would download would naturally be WhatsApp and Truecaller. So that was something that was really key to our success. And I know Nokia hasn't gotten any cred for it, but they were an important part of the journey, even though I don't think that they know what impact they had necessarily, or some people probably know, but the impact that they had on WhatsApp's journey and Truecaller's journey.
That's phenomenal to hear. I mean, that answer in and out has this evident desire to just achieve so much and be ambitious and confident to, go up there and achieve that goal, that it speaks volumes of the journey in and of itself. And I absolutely love that, because the desire is very, very evident. And that's, I think, the hunger every founder and entrepreneur needs to have while starting off that journey and staying ahead of the curve, like you did, having done the due diligence and wanting to make that mark. So superb to hear that. I think moving ahead, I would like to understand, a bit about how the kind of, we've spoken about scale, the global footprint, but how was it that you managed the team sort of a culture, right? Like, I think we've spoken about the team organization bit, but was there any evident thing that you did on the culture bit that really scaled the organization or contributed to how team members would actually join Truecaller? Because given that it was a global product, you naturally needed a lot of fresh talent coming out from different geographies, and it's decentralized in itself, right? So if you could talk to us quickly about that, I think that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Me and Alan, when we started out, being based out of Sweden, and there's not a lot of entrepreneurs with kind of the background that me and Alan has, being immigrants, and we always thought it was difficult, more difficult, and we were always told by our parents that we had to work twice as hard as the average Swede to be successful in Sweden. When we started out on our entrepreneurial journey, we early on decided that we would be driven by values, and we would be pushing for recruiting underdogs, if you will, because we saw ourselves as underdogs, and I think there's a hunger in underdogs that is really hard to quantify, but it's like it's just there, and when you see it, you know it, and you know that they're going to accomplish so much. Obviously, we didn't talk about it in that sense, but what we did say was that we wanted to recruit people from all around the world, because we're building a product for people all around the world. So, in one of the instances, we were speaking to one of the Swedish investors, and just to give you a nuance of, the different conversations that happened at the time. We're speaking to the Swedish investor, very prominent Swedish investor, and they asked us how we're going to build out the org and stuff like that, and we said we have people from 20 different countries at the moment, and we're going to build out, and we're going to recruit the best people, etc. And they very bluntly asked us, like, why are you recruiting people from around the world? The best engineers are here in Stockholm. And we said to ourselves, like, we never told them, but we thought to ourselves, the best engineers are out in the world. Like, it doesn't matter if they're in Sweden or if they're, they went to this university or that university. It might as well be a person from India or from, Middle East, wherever it is. Like, it doesn't matter. We have a lot of people from Latin America or Brazil here as well. And I mean, fantastic engineers from Eastern Europe, fantastic engineers. Why would you just say, like, the Stockholm University people are the best? So we didn't really understand that. And to contrast that, we also, when Sequoia was investing in Truecaller, we were basically getting along really well, and we went out for dinner here in Stockholm. The Sequoia team flew over, and during the dinner we asked them, why do you want to invest in Truecaller? Like, there's so many companies. I'm sure there's so many companies in India. Why do you want to invest in Truecaller based out of Stockholm, from the India fund? And they talked about, like, how the Sequoia founders were really kind of underdogs. They were immigrants in the US, and part of their thing is to invest in these underdogs, because they always think that they will go the extra mile to get things done. And they saw that with us. We had never thought about it the same way, but I think they put it very nicely like that. So that's been one thing that we've been focusing on, like creating opportunities for the people who may not be getting that opportunity initially. And the other thing is, today we have some 45 different nationalities in the Truecaller, among the Truecaller employees, and probably some 50, 60 different languages being spoken. So, that was always important to us, like that we would capture the best people from around the world and make sure that they see that they have an opportunity with Truecaller. And that, when you start to recruit those people, they start to recruit those people as well, etc. And so it kind of replicates down or trickles down into the organization. So I think that's been a large part of it. The second point I wanted to mention, which is shorter, but being value driven. We set out values for the company very early on, and made sure that the whole organization was part in creating those values. So it wasn't something that was dictated from me and Alan, but rather something that we all jointly agreed on and kind of translated on into like, how does this play out? Like when we say be fearless, what does it mean? When we say get shit done, what does it mean? When we say help each other, what does it mean? And it can mean different things to different people. So just making sure that we're all aligned before we decide on these values. So that was another exercise that we've done, and that we did very early on, and that we keep repeating every now and then, just to get everyone back on the boat, to think about the values and how it affects them.
Awesome. I think I truly love that, because rooting for the underdogs and genuinely having that inclusion, value driven, diverse culture is something that you spoke about and is so important, yet not very often practiced. But to see you be an example for everyone out there is such an awesome thing to see. So thanks again, Nami, for walking us through that. That was terrific to hear. I have one last question on the product building journey, after which we can wrap up with a couple of final questions on you. But given that, I've seen you and Alan mention that from day one, the ideas and the vision has always also been to create the best communication experience, right? So on a product level, how does the smaller steps, how do the smaller aspects, so from blocking and understanding caller IDs to messaging to fintech and to other product features that go into the crux of building Truecaller, can you perhaps talk about how the company and the leadership thinks about the smaller steps required in achieving that larger sort of a goal of creating the best communication experience? I think that would be great to understand as to how the innovation remains a constant, the experimentation remains a constant even at scale, and how you can continue to work towards that larger goal, because you're creating a company which will outlive everyone, and I really hope it does. And it's a legendary institution in itself, so it'll be great to understand the smaller nuances that go into building that.
Great question. Yeah, when we think about communication, we think about two specific parts of communication, and one is safety and one is efficiency. So what we try to build for is either safety or efficiency or both, basically, the overlap. And you could argue caller ID and call blocking are specifically those kind of things. Like it's much more efficient if you tell me who is calling. It's also much safer for me if I get to know if it's a spammer or a fraudster, and I get to block it. So that was kind of the core of where it started. But then over time, when you're working in the communication space and there's safety and efficiency that you're focusing on, you also have to take into account that we're trying to build for the masses. We're trying to build for the world. And, you could do that by building walled gardens, or you can try to integrate with as much as possible. And we've gone the second route, like trying to integrate with as much as possible. Like it doesn't matter, if I'm on Gmail and you're on Hotmail, like we can still email each other, and your name actually still pops up when we email each other. It's not just your email address, it's your name, right? So it's really odd when you don't have that in the smartphone, like in the phone, So that was really where we started out. And then the question becomes like, okay, do you dive deeper into walled gardens, or do you try to play in the larger ecosystem? And we've tried to build everything for the larger ecosystem, and trying to create compatibility and not trying to create walled gardens. But in the cases where walled gardens are necessary, or are the only necessary way forward, then we'd have to go with that. So for instance, we have our own VoIP functionality, but I would much have preferred, and we pitched this to Google many years ago, like, why don't you put VoIP as part of the Google Play services so that every company that wants to can enjoy this and benefit from the VoIP capabilities. Why are you building it into Google Duo, video calling and voice calling? Like, just make it part of the Android ecosystem. So there's an equivalent to FaceTime and iMessage, etc. But open it up so you can even do it on Apple phone. But they didn't want to go that route. They wanted to go the walled garden route. But and that meant for us that we automatically had to move to a walled garden kind of thing and building our own VoIP solution. But we much prefer the open garden where everyone can like inclusion and all these things. It's really important to us. When we're looking at retaining the innovation within the company, these are the things that we're thinking about and getting like all the BU leads and every team member to kind of try to think about. And then once they set up their roadmap, which they do by themselves, there's the editorial process of going through what we call the business review, which happens twice a year. So we basically go through the plans. We may suggest changes to it, but most often we don't. And once that plan is approved, you really have a full stack team, a leadership, and like advisors around, etc. Like that team is fully equipped to go and execute on their mission. And a lot of really fantastic small even products have come out of this. Like if you've noticed the call alert functionality where we send you a notification saying Jivraj is about to call you, those kind of ideas come from the team because they're trying to fix or solve a different problem. In reality, we were trying to solve issue with iOS where you can't do caller ID in the same way. So we built it for iOS, and then we realized, like, hey, why don't we, like, what would it look like if we had this for Android as well? Like, what would be the benefit? And then after a while, you start to realize, like, when you experience the iOS app, you're like, wow, it's really cool. It's actually telling me who's about to call me. That could be valuable for our Android users as well. And then you just ship it over. Obviously, there's a huge difference in the scale of that, etc., given our user base. So it took some time to engineer that product. But the ideas really come from the teams. Like, as they try to solve one problem, they figure something, and it becomes a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. So that's really the culture that we try to cultivate.
Spectacular. I think, again, I love that, given that you talk about the open garden approach and integrating as many value solutions as possible for the end consumer, which is what eventually matters and is the core of a great product, which Truecaller evidently is. Wonderful. I think this has been super, super awesome. And as we go on to the end portions of the video and this episode, I think I want to just take a couple of minutes to understand more about you as a person, you as the co-founder, and a large part of Nami, the person, as opposed to how we've spoken about Truecaller. So I think the first question there is, the evident ambition, confidence, vision is there just from that day one. And I remember you talking about one of those stories about how you talk about yours and Alan's influence coming from your mothers, right? People shouldn't work because they need to or have to. They should work because they want to. Yeah, no, I love that, and that stuck with me, right? And I really believe that that's such a powerful quote in itself, right? But what I'm trying to understand here is if you can talk about the core motivations that drive you as a person, that keep you at it, right? That make you dream high enough. We have the IPO coming up, and Truecaller is done. I can't speak enough of how well and tremendous Truecaller has eventually done, right? But at the back end, there's so much that goes on, and there's efforts of years, sleepless nights that go into it, right? So if you can just like ponder a bit upon that aspect of Nami and talk to us about how that is built into your system, I think that would be tremendous to hear.
I'll take a stab at it. I realize the tough questions are now coming. I think one of the strengths that me and Alan has are that we have the same value system. Like we were brought up with the same type of values, and it made our partnership really, really strong. So whenever we've had ups and downs throughout the journey, we've always kind of been able to help each other, not necessarily, help each other as in I will go and do this for you, but when something is really not working out and you start to feel slightly depressed by it, you open your heart and you pour out whatever is in there, and then the other person between us always takes this role of like, it'll be fine, we'll just go do this and that, even though that person may like, if I'm depressed, Alan will be equally at least depressed, but he will still take on that role and be like, no, it'll be fine, don't worry, we'll just do this and that and make something up, and it'll make me feel a bit better. And then tomorrow, we go back at it together, and then I realized that, oh, actually he was feeling very down about it as well. And that partnership has really allowed us to excel and to learn from each other and to do better together. But if we're only looking at my background and things like that, very similar. I mean, me and Alan have very similar backgrounds. Like families came to Sweden, always had this underdog mentality. It was kind of fed to us by our parents, really. Like it wasn't that we thought that was the case. We thought Sweden, and we still think Sweden, is a fantastic country with a lot of opportunities. But our parents saw it differently because they had to struggle with learning the language and a bunch of different things, right? Getting a job, getting into getting jobs even, etc. And they had these struggles, and they kind of fed us with that notion of like, it's going to be really difficult, so get prepared. And then once you grow up and you realize that it's not that difficult necessarily. There was difficult moments for sure in like getting your first job and these kind of things. But once you get into it, it's kind of okay. And I think a lot of people go through the same kind of struggles. But then you realize that you still have this hunger. You want to accomplish twice as much. Like, why is this? Is this it? You think to yourself, is this it? So I think that is part of the hunger that both of us had, and why our partnership really became fantastic. And that didn't change until we had kids. So when you have kids, something else happens, right? You before you think, is this it? And now you're thinking like, now I have something that I'm afraid of losing. Because before I didn't have anything I was afraid of losing, but now I have something I'm afraid of losing, and that becomes a different type of thought process in itself as well. So I think over time things have changed for us, but we still have that hunger. Now with age and these kind of things, and maturity, our willingness to take risk is really high. But I think that naturally what you see in many leaders is that over time the willingness to take risks becomes dampened, and you have to motivate yourself. And I can't expect my parents to give me that motivation anymore. That like I have my thing that gives me motivation, and Alan has his thing, but they were at different points of our times of our journey when we realized we had these different new things that would give us that energy to take risks. So I think not sure if I'm answering the question, but that's how our willingness to take risks and this drive has really come from.
No, I think that answers a lot of it, because I think like you talk about that progression, right? But the underlying hunger that is so evident, right? Like, is this it? Like, that's a question that so many of us continue to ask each other and ourselves as well. And I think to be able to answer that and strive towards achieving and increasing those the bounds of what is achievable for us as people is spectacular. So that was fabulous to hear, honestly. Thanks, Nami, for that. This has been spectacular. I mean, like for the last question, I don't think there could be a fitting end to this marvelous conversation. But going with the stereotypical one, given that there have been such a diverse set of experiences with Truecaller, and the journey I hope is only getting started, and there's going to be so much of success that lies ahead. Can you perhaps just ponder upon the last decade or so and talk to us about the most important learnings that you've picked up from your journey, and perhaps leave us with a couple of last learnings from your amazing founder journey that has been.
Well, to keep, I mean, we've had many, many, many learnings, but to kind of pick up on some of the things that we talked about, I think that for a lot of people, and me and Alan vividly try to express this among Swedish entrepreneurs, but I think it could be make sense to also mention that to other aspiring entrepreneurs, even in India. That many times you think that you have to build for your home market. You think that you have to build for this. India is big enough. Blah blah blah. Like all these things, and surely it is, as opposed to Sweden, but the reality is for us, India found us. Like if we had that mentality, and we would be, US would have been a fantastic market too, or Europe would have been a fantastic market. We could have aspired to that, but instead, like going global and really taking that as part of the ethos that this is a pretty strict guideline that we need to follow. That we're building products for the world and not just for this specific country or for this specific group of people. I think that's, I mean, if that's not what you're doing, if you're not building a niche product, then, going global and kind of letting the world figure you out, and you figuring the world out, is a really important first step that I think a lot of people miss. They're thinking like, I will go from, I mean, in India, it's such a massive country. You're talking about, I will first get this state, then I will try to expand to that state, and then, I need to get critical mass here and there, etc. Instead of just allowing the world to figure you out and you figuring the world out. So I think that's one of the learnings, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs. And what else? If I mention anything from the investor journey, the investor's journey that we've made, I think one of the key learnings was that you should. I'm biting my tongue here to make sure I say it right, but there's always going to be investors that just bring money, and there's going to be the smart money, and there's going to be all these kind of different things. But what you really need to figure out is who is your partner on that journey. Like when you think about the different VCs, etc., don't think about them as a label. Like it's still an individual person that's going to sit on your board, and it's really important. We've had such a fantastic support from Shailesh at Sequoia, and I think that we've been very lucky to have him on board. I've seen a lot of fantastic people at Sequoia in general, but also I've seen many of our other VCs where it's been very dependent on who is the person who leads the round, and etc. And making sure that there's that you click with that person, it's going to be so important. Don't just take the money for that. Like in that case, already from the beginning, ask if you can switch partner or something, like if it doesn't work out. So I think that's important as well. Like just to make sure that you have a sound board, and that you can focus on building the business, and they can focus on helping you, as opposed to, troubles that can come along the way.
Awesome. I think so. The global mindset from day zero and finding the right partners along the way and not going for just money, because I think through the journey of a decade long or maybe 20, 30 years, there's nothing which just becomes capital, or there are no variables which come in singularity. Everything comes in packages. And in the case of investors, it is the board and the people that come along with it, and finding the right partners is definitely a great cue. Wow, I think this has been so wonderful. We're finally at the end of the episode, but I wish I could continue longer. But that wouldn't do any justice to everybody listening. But this has been spectacular, Nami. I mean, to talk to somebody who's created a product you truly admire as a consumer first, and for somebody building the podcast for the last 9, 10 months, this is a true pleasure, and I cannot express how honored I am to have this opportunity to talk to you, and not just talk to you, but have such an enriching conversation through the last 50-55 minutes that we've spoken. So I would like to thank you for being on
Thanks.
the show and spending your time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, and this is going to be so helpful for everybody.
For sure. Thanks a lot, Jivraj, and thanks for doing this. It's an amazing initiative, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Nami.